to Jajer Sondro, Jamada Duja Panjamba, Sajalamba Tavra Jebel, Jabajat, Gozanza, Norjan Janjan Telo Naro, Time, Abamala, Chuja Gambo, Amorba, Javan, Dugomba. Kajulama Nanjada, Joji, Donandana, Zara, Donjada, Lama Lava, Laya, Jesus, Lazoyan, Jamsang Alava, Tendre Donjan, Pegala, Zoe, Dogalo, Juson, Varazunja, Labdozor, Jualam, Dondo, Varazunja, Labdozor, Lan, Truas, Varazunja, Labdos. Druva Yizan Javara Zanja Labdozo, Ganga Denjan Javaranjo, Gaba Meba Je, Meba Chiba Meba Ta, Meba Wa Meba Do Meba. Tante Dome Donje Me, Rubanya Jeje Damba, Zoba Zanja Mananje, Tamba de la Zanza, Do, Timme Osa, Toje Jangurdo, Mande Shizang, Pochadavar. Tam jeze ba gunjen ju jeje nyamen dogon renjen gu shanza renjen zaba lama chenje gu zon do jeze non do da da ge ju lam be da ge dem ba dan sun jeje don ja jen ban ra ba zen je la do zo nam kwa dang nyam be sim jin tam chi ju don do den de la me ba yang da ba zu bu san je ju ko man rum bo je to bar sha Ti chi de tambe chu kan ki sin de to nyam sa la war ju nyam be sam ba chan chon cho de sem ji ba dang chu nim be kun ju dang kun long ma na ro ko na sem ban sa de la kan sam ra sa ve chu ne jin ji tin sum jung gom bo de ni jen ze be tambe chu kung ba jik ba de re de la je do ji song ja dang ap ju yo ba dang 대 좀 그거는 제가 요바를 했더니 다좀 되는데 공도 휴신네 되어도 혈담당 린탑 제 요번한 게 혈담형 휴신 말이다 린탑 때 슈버가 린탑 때라 도르지송 깊지 힘든 요번한 게 the sumche suktik ba there is suktik sonire sumche soni ba ndera sumche soni ba is then de la tamal lusta ser katam me shibandak think yoris
So cultivating motivation, thinking that may all sentient beings, limitless as space, attain the state of perfect and complete enlightenment. This is the motivation to have, thinking that I'm going to do, listen to these teachings and then practice them for this sake. And so such an unmistaken motivation of bodhichitta is the unmistaken motivation for listening to the Dharma. And the Dharma we are listening to is the Gong Chik, the single intent by Jikten Sumgön, consisting of 150 Vajra statements, 7 sections, oral instructions and a supplement, and we completed all those 7 sections and also the oral instructions. And we are now in the supplement, which consists of 47 Vajra statements, and today we are in Vajra statement number 32. And it says, applying ascetic practices and so forth to the ordinary body depletes it.
Da kathab shibande karisna ka shibade darade kable kawadrwa deni thup shibande de solo che danglin jin kawa che de se ngarwa dang do lang serwa yindu deni Tarakatab Shibadon there is. Then in the Yinke Naranzo number Sanji Bug Chudu Chipartu, Ta Sanji Compantabala, kathab jigo gre so kathab shibande khona glamne teni sangjen rok yo bata wung zong sumware perna sanje chomden de ke lotola kawaje nawade kathabis deletin sangje songwa tawatang naropa ke kachin chuni sine tena jenze bare deletin de naropa triple compound top songwa tawatang tene malare pa ke tene ta semkhar gotho sine ta teta bigena kawa jin ta deletin sangje songwa tawa jingu song sundu tene jidin songgong ke ta
Kangpa go senkang kuto sanara.
Kangwa toka go. Ngenwa. Ta je kantara de ying sungdu ta teso rang kona la tine chek sangje songwa ta ung zong ro tu jidin songgong dan te taba mare song. Katab jipo ke sangje ke yo mare song.
And so this term ascetic practices, it like literally means, so in Tibetan it's Gatup, and Ga means means like hardship and difficulty or ascetic, and Tup is to kind of tolerate it or accept it, to take on hardships. And so that is this verse saying that practicing ascetic practices to the ordinary body depletes it, is that so other people, he says that because other people say that in order to attain enlightenment, one, as a Buddhist practitioner, one must endure ascetic hardships or practices. But so in terms of ascetic practices or hardships, they are not mere like a different like torture and so that we put ourselves through. For example, the Buddha Shakyamuni himself had endured hardships for 6 years meditating, and that is referred to as an ascetic practice. And so then those others say that this is how, as a result of all this, he then attained enlightenment. Or Naropa endured 12 major hardships, and then he attained enlightenment. Or Milarepa had to construct this 9-storied tower, and then as a result he attained enlightenment. And so Jikten Sumgön says that it's not just that, so that in itself, ascetic practices in itself do not lead to enlightenment.
Yene jirtang ka kathab shibande kalwe tang zunjun de go yore dene ta cheparatu jabu ju tang jubu ju la so ba nyamli toni samna tana kathab la so ba go yores junsin telatine dene naropa la so ba ka wa chepare malare pa tang tene tela subak lama gyushini mambok kawaje naware yene yang kawaje pa chikpo la tene sangje sumare we sena ndamare sangje chumden de tabe yena tene loto kawaje pa za mache pa ke ti gongron ne tene kongke tene nevin pa la phemne tandabana da junumbola kawache nawari de samkayang driba ta ro yore te yin yang sangje shibade yong tham me pare tene lotul kawache ne yang tane da sangje tha tejibo ka sangma je de tene sizuda dorje tabe tingen zela nyambar jane tene sem khotone kandar tene sangje songare naropa etang malare patabe na tetabe so sem khotone drowa tham songare sangje hibande sem khotone sangje go yorema yozang there is
And so in general, this ascetic practice, for that we do in general required to endure some hardships and to be diligent. And especially according to the lower tantras, the Kriya and Charya tantras, and it is said that a certain level of ascetic practice is required. And also, for example, Naropa endured many hardships, or Milarepa, or many other spiritual masters. But then it is not that only through these ascetic hardships that they attained enlightenment. So that is just not the case. The Buddha endured hardships meditating for 6 years in a place of isolation for a long time, and at that time one does purify obscurations, but this is not all it took to attain enlightenment. So even though he did endure those hardships for 6 years, that it alone didn't lead to his enlightenment, but later on, when his mind was resting in the samadhi of the Vajra-like samadhi, that is when he attained enlightenment. And also Naropa, Milarepa, and so on, it is through their mind mainly that they attained liberation. So becoming a Buddha, attaining Buddhahood, is the mind that has to become a Buddha.
Dan de kapsa tani da taba masong na yang de luchipo ka katabla tina tani trowa thoju yoba tanda ben temo ki yiwang la sone chu duptang do de hamaon tani yang katab chibo lamben dong ki yore perna menga timba si tani yaka hajang ka chawa chimbo nan de
Menga tempa sana mirve.
menga
Yana mirva.
me lakpa ni na me ni zong ngo thola me je zong tini thakor ta chama me ya ne me ka kor ne
Menga tempa sayati tempa chikpena sangye tempa tabo tempa chikki mingre yana milarepa tabo me chikki mingre.
menga temba se me nyam se le ne me ka chawa
Nyamle mingre.
chawa nyam le tini yaka ha chang ka chawa chimbo do gong a chun do chawa chimbo ne de ta na la ya tarong me ya me thakol me ya ro me ya me chi ma lan do ta me ka kor
Ko ti me chen do marve.
that's it me ka hana tsek ma tsek sa ta so ha chang ke lu la ka thap che
Ina mera wo.
tharain thal me ya ro
Ta thala di nangla mara.
ting a so da me cha na zu bong go jo ja chi zab za chi de me yong chi de ngo la me je ya ngo ka la
Khanasa.
ta pho ba ndo chi pho ba si zama na me ya de tini ma sa me o ta la ba na me zong na tini ta zu ba gom ta sin ta ben ji do ta ji de ta de le den de ji sang jian ro wa ro wa tham ro wa ta ngu zong ro de tini sen zu ju ma ja lu ji bo ka thap je sun de ge yong go ma re so
Ina di nyamle di nangba mara ba. Chun nyamle senke mara.
ju nyang le chi ge re
Mara nangba ba. Nangba.
de nangba ma re de ta nangba la yang je su su ge zu bo che ba ju na ta ji ke yo song do su su zu bo lo de ni pe na che cha ba na wa ta do cha ro je ta na wen de su su zu bo dong ne su su ge dong jak sin
Nangba
yo
chigre.
ta nangba na lo ta na yo nangba khon chu du dang de ta ma
Ina
re
nangba nangla tungura. Ina nangba nangla me tin chigre mara.
me de yo ma re
Kimi shemba ro. Ina konso sangye ina labke ro shemba.
ta ka thap je na
So it is not just not only through putting one's body through hardships that one attains the state of liberation, because that would actually, not just putting one's body through hardships would actually really mean that one practices the Dharma controlled by ignorance, and one doesn't really know how to properly practice the Dharma. For example, there is one practice that is done by, so these are actually non-Buddhist practices in different religions, but then they still claim that through these practices one attains like a state of enlightenment according to their religion. And so, for example, it's like practicing austerity with fire. So there's this practice where it's very hot in summertime, like so hot that you could boil an egg, like for fry an egg on the ground, and then still it's already so hot, and then they're creating this circle of fire, and the practitioner has to stand in the center of that circle of fire, and then on his head there is a vessel with fire, and then on both of his hands there are also vessels with fire, and so he has to stand like that, unmovingly, and practice forbearance, and so then the accomplishment of that, then some would kind of recognize as the highest achievement, like enlightenment, but this is just a physical hardship, not a hardship of the mind. And also within Buddhism, for example, it's not really a Buddhist practice, but it happens sometimes that what people do is when desire arises in their mind, then they take a whip and hit themselves with that and so on. So they punish themselves, their own bodies. And so all of these like physical austerities do not in itself lead to enlightenment.
Then ne kapta che nyumomba ngonuzi zamla Thailand na ten and ke yores ato ten tharthok sangji ji chu Thailand chipo la ten drajena te yong me pa yin cha jerse hwale chunjo nand rinchin ter tang rawai semji sang da mahina song semji sang 가르에서 다 샘고 돈이 배는 뉴모 탐지 샘지 돈이 마좀 시그레다 근데 용딘 탐지 샘고 돈이 야지네 드라고저데 가르침 보래 얘네 루트 샘니 핀춘 팀들 뚜도 요자 루그 돈이 딘딘 체바라 요리데 조데 샘라레데 요리스
Sometimes if it's necessary to use a method to suppress one's afflictive emotions, then it is okay to apply various methods like that, but one shouldn't think that this alone will lead to enlightenment. That will not happen. Shantideva said in the Bodhicharyavatara that one doesn't know the secret of the mind, which is similar to a precious treasure, and so forth. So this secret of the mind is that everything comes from the mind. The afflictive emotions and all the good qualities come from the mind. And the body and the mind are also connected to each other. They're interdependent. And so surely the body also has an effect on the mind, but the mind definitely is more important.
Tirana yinke junyo nando kareson yoresena simsong tur yog ma to pa tur yog ma bu cheshik saso tur yog sedita simsong tur yog ma to pa tur yog mangbu cheshik jas ta sem de song yare si domba la so ba songo na ya sem ko ton songo yore ma che hiksa sin ta tur yu yinda de so ta de zang gar chi ma ma ri dong ra chi bu ko ma ri che hiksa sin na ja ko je che hik
Oh,
che hik
yeah.
ta sem ko ton ni zo ji jan zo de sem re ma do 다 루조 마지 셈조지 셈 돈다 대자다 요래 이나양 다 셈조 지도 루드 띠냥 깔마 제바 됐다 마인 봐 남주냠네 지도
Also it is said in the Bodhicharyavatara it is said that aside from like holding a yogic discipline of the mind, what's the need of so many physical austerities? So basically what it is saying is that the mind is most important. It's saying that don't consider your body as most important. But also that doesn't mean that the body is not important at all. It is just from the perspective of practice, it's the mind that's most important.
Andi kapsu zo karesong yung go yoresina, perna sotati kapsu yang na yung na jine nabu min tang, to so nang yung go yore, min chu chowan rao tang. Sudro ke kala, sudro ke kongcek jin do yang, sudro dara nepa dara ina, sudro ke shela chu choba. La soba dara ke nama yore, jansem kapsu ina re. Teni dara ten nga ke kapsu, sotar da mi sa chog yores teni suro namjin da gelong tam suro khaze maza ba nyamni nang dong kin na yang nan ne da nawala so ba kanga yo na yang suro khala chu chowa da na ma yo mari de sotar ya namjin mi sa chog de yin pe nang ngarang so chi nyungnen ro ta nyungnen de labla samar de ang kono khon sar ko so ta samsan ti ta pen suru khaje pang de ros ti min sa du ta so ja wa kra cha de ro za wa da ja wa ina yang na wa yo ros ta samsam de dang na wa lunga ka pong dun sin me ge chen nang ke lu dang a to ni yang pang nawa yorwa loji mege som danga mege ye yorwa te so dang ke yang lunga ko pungdung khorje sen yi ge ton ri ma do lu danga to ne yang nawa yore kang ka so gu ba chim bol tin
So for example, also what this refers to is, for example, in the pratimoksha, the individual liberation, then often the monks are not eating after midday, so they're not eating at dinner and so on. And so then, however, if someone is sick, for example, and has to take medicine, so medicine is also considered something that you're actually eating. And so therefore, if somebody is sick, even though they're not supposed to eat after midday, they are permitted to eat medicine, or if it's required for their sickness, they are allowed to eat food and so on. So there are certain exceptions like that. Or in the bodhisattva vehicle, there is sometimes the exception made where it becomes permissible of the 10 non-virtuous actions to engage in those of the body and the speech, the 3 of the body and the 4 of the speech. So depending on the need, sometimes if it is necessary, then it is permitted to engage in those 7 non-virtuous actions of body and speech, but only those, not the mind.
Tene sangha kapsu yina dorna pungpo nga namne sanje nga rabda tra sungba yindu ngarang tsuka pungpo nga ponde sanje nga dani chada yore lakpar de tarate Jikten sunggon ke yiba de jinam du no yong drop se ta pungpo nga la lakö ran yin ko drop de yoba tanda sungko yore tenza dala me sungwa yina tani yang sangha ka kapsu pumpo sanje nga dani tela nyezi jeba yin song zatong jeba njong yong bala so ba sung yo zang lunda me ning yo mares ni ba jeba jimbo ju ning yo mares.
Also in the secret mantra yana, it is said that one's 5 aggregates are the embodiment of the 5 Buddhas, are Buddhas. And also, Jikten Sumgön has said that the generation stage is primordially completely established, which means that by nature, one's own aggregates are actually the form of the deity. And so therefore, abusing one's own body, according to the secret mantra, constitutes a root downfall of the tantric vows. It is the 8th root downfall of the tantric vows. So according to the secret mantrayana 2, one must not abuse or severely punish one's body.
너는 송거요래 센치나 룬치나 춘치 송 된자 센치나 세요 사마요나 되니 루본 초딩 야보요래 송로와 루본 초딩 야보요나 니 추야보도 그래서 센치나 세요나 히던가 사마요나 아니 치스도 요부터 세요나 류요나 다 추요래서.
And it is said in the sutras that if one has food, then one has a body, or in other words, one is healthy. And if one is healthy, so if one has a body, then one has the dharma. So if one is healthy, then one can practice the dharma.
Chose malongwa the quad lingor in the gapsa. Chose long said the that sensory the luto chunirim in Yang Kablem Betson Kayamese, but then chose long so. Young Delan the Songoyande and Gashi chose Kavalongers and Luchipol, Kawamato Senguton, Kezoji Kayam Majan. Del Delatin Song Yuguyuza, Luta Semin Dreva Yoba Hako, didn't it say Rimbo? The Dutch in Rogo Yore, the last Roshina, then it got the Hako de Yore. Benatahi, Sotartan Jansamla, Gahin Nawajin Zesona, Nawa Yori Humba. O that now I use it so Megeba in Samari Sena, they are non do Yoroa. Guamalon Tarama, Megeba is on Yore. Jansamla Lunga Pundun Cortian now and there, Jansho Sambag Yindun Jachimboji Sibala. Take a leg, they Yami Manang Ranang Cha Yonko in Sansa. That none while tine, Janshos about Nipa yo Marius and Nipa Tintin yours. You know, yes, Janshos about oh, Nan Dichi, the Tanga Yawachi, Jego, and Pernangak Tachi, Lungaka to Megawa, Jebalatine, Nanyawan and Rogo, you know. Degree, see. Kinds and the Yinun Jachimbo and Robert was. There, the lab and some of that is around to the Yaminchi do so similar, some of Tandaya. Netrem Lungaki Magawaji Jigoina. The Kachin don't change chas on touch Jigawaji chasons. And the Jeban the Kitin and Ala Tinti legendary Yore, Tenzanyawan Roko Yore. Nala Dungatin younger Yore, in a young. Netren the legan dick connected, Simjin drown me ba. Pinto some Jemachabaji. Junko Yubaina, that Luton juris, that data of Venetini. The night son of Tango Juris.
So the point to be understood here is that we shouldn't fall into either of the extremes. Also, one shouldn't think that, for example, it's just the mind and the body doesn't matter at all. One doesn't have to be disciplined with the body at all, and so on. That would also be falling into one extreme. And then the other side of the spectrum is to only put the body through hardships, but not change the mind at all. So the body and the mind are connected to each other. And so we have to find just the right measure or balance of practicing with body and mind. So this is the crucial point that one has to understand here. And so when we say that there are certain practices that are supposed to be non-virtues but are permitted in the pratimoksha or the bodhisattva path, then no one might wonder that, okay, since it is permitted, it means that the non-virtue doesn't become, is no longer non-virtues. But actually that's also a mistaken understanding. It is still non-virtues. Even though it is permitted, it is still non-virtues. And that means that a bodhisattva has to accomplish the benefit of others extensively. And so in order to do that, sometimes they just have no choice but to engage in some negative action. And surely the bodhisattva, even the bodhisattva accumulates negative karma by doing that, but he thinks about it in a different way. And so he thinks that if I do that, the bodhisattva is very clear that if I do that, I will definitely take birth in hell, but that's okay. I can go to hell if it accomplishes the benefit of others. So this is how they think, and so also this is when we practice how we should begin to thinking that so today it happens that to benefit someone else, I have to do something negative, non-virtuous with my body or speech. If I do that, surely the karma will ripen, I will take birth in hell and so on, and I will experience suffering. But if it is for the benefit of limitless sentient beings, the benefit is inconceivable, and therefore one would just forsake one's own well-being for the sake of sentient beings.
장미 bar 초가제 바 구송 단디갑수 상하들라 자베주 주부주 난졸주 난졸라미주 손에 주데 예스 단라차도 요래 대인자이 다 잉게 가래 공고 요래스나 주데 오마솜데 오마솜스드 자주 주주 남졸주 손본데 장동리소 데 남절 라미 그 주데 니동 차도 요장 데니 다 다라데 라미 주주 지보라 다 하장 그 땡사보를 마도 인다도서 대장고 땡사보 차요 말이 손나 다 송로 요레스.
Then there's Vajra statement 33, which says that no matter if the level is a meaning requiring further interpretation or a definitive meaning, the detailed rituals are necessary for all. So it is speaking about the 4 classes of tantra in a secret mantra, which are the Kriya, Charya, Yoga, and Anuttara Yoga Tantras. And so no matter what is the level, means all those 4 tantras is meaning requiring further interpretation or a definitive meaning. So details and rituals are necessary for all 4 of them. And that's in response to those people who claim that of these 4 classes of Tantra, the earliest 3, which are the Kriya, Charya, and the Yoga Tantras, they say that these 3 are not so profound because they are of a meaning requiring further interpretation, and it is only the supreme class, which is the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, that is of definitive meaning. So they are saying that that the other 3 tantras is only the unsurpassed, the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, that's profound, that's the definitive meaning, while the other 3 tantras are not so profound.
Tarang nga sarma wan sibe jude yek na lo ke lami ge jude ngidong yin pa te Jikten Sumgön ki yi pa yang chorang yin ki yi char de jik pa yin song re de ngidong ke de cha de yoris ngidong cha de yor yin yang tene ja ju da namjor ju namjor lami ju de sumbo ngi par de changgo yoris song lami ge ju nyam ne chi ba la de so chang dong re se ma yo gyo ya yo ma ri song de so nan de lami ge ju ge nyam lin de yong kong da wo de ju de go ma sum bo zena da de ju de o ma sum bo de cha de yo re de en zan tan Jikten sung go zo jum de ke tim de ke ya na song yong ge yo zang da de so ke che ja ju ju la so bo ke che nyamlin ke ramba ma chang na namje lami ke nyamlin na rewe Tela tu pa kin driver te min to ko yo mare so. Kan se jo ma sang ba la tin driver min to ko yo mare driver ji min go na jo chang go ya wa.
So where they both agree, Jikten, Sumgön and other people's claim is that when it comes to the Anuttara Yoga Tantra, which is the unsurpassed, the highest Yoga Tantra of the sacred mantra in the new tantric system, and this is of definitive meaning. So this is where they agree upon. But what Jikten Sumgön is asserting is that also the practices of the three lower tantras of the Kriyacharya and Yoga Tantras must also be complete within the practice of the Anuttara Yoga Tantra. So therefore he's saying that do not just discard them or dismiss them, thinking that they are kind of interpretive teachings that require further interpretation, but actually the source of any practice of Anuttara Yoga Tantra are the three lower tantras. And Jikten Sumgön is saying that on the basis of the interdependence of karma. He's saying that if you have not practiced the stages of the first three classes of Tantra, then because they're all interconnected, you cannot accomplish the result of the Anuttara Yoga Tantra. Because if a cause is lacking, a result cannot ripen. For a result to ripen, you need to produce the cause.
Ta changdong da ngidong zena lami ge ju dan ju de o ma sum bo kang yin na yang teni choga je pa go yo re so no da lami ge ju re kang go ma re sen de ke mang bo nang ro yo re de ke yo ma re so per na pawang ta welan sum ba na pom bo wang de je dang a so ju de o ma kap so zo be na sung ko yo re de lami ge ju na yang ta ra de pom bo wang ne juk je go so na song yo ba re se pawang la juk jik song lami ge ju na pawang la juk jik song yo re se
Ana juk jik lana me gyura
lami be ju
na. So in terms of those teachings that require further interpretation and then the definitive teachings, a ritual is needed for all of them. It's necessary for the three lower classes as well as the highest, the unsurpassed. So one just cannot say that it's just for the lower ones that one needs ritual, but not for the unsurpassed and so on. So for example, it begins with the vase empowerment, when we receive an empowerment. And so when the vase empowerment is generally maybe speaking from the lower tantras, but it is also practiced in the unsurpassed tantras. And the vase empowerment, for example, consists of 11 different stages.
Da den de pawang juk jik shiban de shine ya po yo re se den zang pawang juk jik bon da kang re se na je dang nga rang zo phung bo nga dang phung bo nga san je nga re chur mi zi nyu mo nga yi shi nga re chur mi zi de la de ni da ra de dam wang ga re yo re shu na dam bo de le chue wang de ni ju bin ge wang so de ni da dor ji wang de ni zhe ge wang de ni meng ge wang da de de wang a bon de la dor ji lo mo wang a shu ge yo re
Dor ji lopen.
dor ji lo ma
Loma. So it would be good to know about those 11 vase empowerments. So the first, the five, this empowerment in general is in order to ripen the 5 aggregates into the 5 dhyani Buddhas, and in order to ripen the 5 afflictions into the 5 wisdoms. And so the first one of those 11 is the water empowerment. Second one is the crown ornament empowerment. Third one is the Vajra empowerment. The fourth is the bell empowerment, and the fifth is the name empowerment. So these first 5 empowerments are the Vajra disciple empowerments.
Tene teo de nga kwang
Drupadi.
Drupad nga kwang. Dene dumba de la sangchin kwang de re sangchin de wang de la pena chura maung bala tene sanje karingo la sanje da pena rexom pemere da debin hibere da dorjire kari rex sanje ke do data babena sona long tim ba je yorwa kanta long tim ba wanga hyo yore. Tene jepa de la tarate dumba cha so. Tene jepa de la wog yung wang so. Wog yung wa hibande tene dorji lopung ke dan zon de chu tene ngin song la mando son da wog yung si de chen na ji bu dong ro jirwa. Te cholang so tam sai de chur yin de song ai na. Tene da goba de la dorji tur yok wang tene joba de la juba tur yok wang da de so la dorji lopung ke wang so na.
Chuchipa no tilaban.
Chuchi ba chama so.
Ama tenso nga bo tenso. Tochi lopen wara. Number 6 is the mantra empowerment. Number 7 is the secret name empowerment, and which also is called the prophecy empowerment, where one is given a name which kind of serves as a prophecy of one's future enlightenment, in what class of Buddhas one will attain enlightenment. For example, in the Lotus class, or the Tathagata class, or the Vajra class, and so on, or family. The number 8 is the breath-giving empowerment, and so that is that when the Vajra master takes an oath to the disciple, saying that from now on you will not take birth in the 3 lower realms, and so that is if you keep the Samaya properly. Number 9 is the Vajra ascetic discipline empowerment, and number 10 is the ascetic discipline empowerment. And so this set of 5 empowerments, these are the together this is the Vajra master empowerment.
Chukche ba da zeng tu ba wang hyo dan de dong ga re sna da hyo wo yong zar song wo yong de dan de zon de so so je ngin song da lan je mo go wa de da ha go na de da wo de ni so so la ga wa che par jin ji ne de la zeng tu ba wang ya chi sem la to cho go lo dom ra ba je wa la so ta de de gan dar wang sheba de jeong ke music wang se de wang de la tine de ni dorji ge thi nyamlin de ram chi chen de ni ji ram da zoram gom no so lam je ram de so de ni de sangha ge chi jude oma za ma se ge jude goma tham je la da de so ka ta gung wang la so ba tham je ka ta gung de so chama go yo re so 장님 미베 초가 제바 그송 저다지 소소하 뭐 사드네 남절라미린 저기리세 바야야반로 마인바 양제 동다가 힐바 지름 마다라데 자주르다 주주르스는 잡자휴 제네 제 초슬롱 마송와제 고혼도와 간단냠니스 가연 줌제 코랑 초스마랑 바인자 데이터 조 송크요레스.
And the 11th empowerment sorry. The 11th empowerment is the empowerment of the encouraging the mind, like lifting the mind, and so basically here one rejoices, one feels encouraged, because during the breath-giving empowerment, the Vajra Master has told you that from now on you will not take birth in the 3 lower realms. So when you know that, you rejoice in that. And so your mind becomes like lifted. And so these are the 11 empowerments of the base empowerment. And in general, the empowerment is referred to as the ripening empowerment. And after having received empowerment, one receives the liberating instructions, and then gradually practices the generation and completion stages. And in the secret mantra, then not only does one practice the 3 lower tantras, but also in the context of the highest yoga tantra, none of the various rituals are necessary. And the rituals, like in an empowerment of the highest secret mantra, the rituals of the 3 lower tantras are necessary, such as the like preparatory rituals and so forth. They're all necessary. None of them is dismissed. So if one doesn't understand that, one may think that one can just like let go of all these preparatory and various rituals and just practice the Anuttara Yoga Tantra. So that's a misunderstanding. Or one may think that it is just during the Charya and Kriya Tantras and so on that one has to be careful and so on. So basically, the instruction that one should understand here is that because of karma, one should not fall into any of the extremes.
다 dorji son sunchu sogi patere. Dei ndorna duba yang ni yi son. 다 다시 강라 왕 장이 미바 초가 제바 구 송아 데 양 고아 린당 제노는 대아랑 임바 되다 나바 근데 고아 랑송나 네 말이서 단데 들자를 뜨는데 간자 겐신을 뜨는데 다시 강데 팀바 진신 다we 송용 그 다라 간자 겐신을 뜨는데 대연더나 순데 다 초가 두바랑 데네 데네 들자제 양 람데 야트 토고 요바이나 yang tela duba de kan de yore somare de ender na duba yan yi somanda dan de da ganza nyung re ni ren da wo ji cha ge yore per na dan ngarang zo je buju nan tin do le chumba yin na de ne lama tribu ge de zhuge tu song jin ji de de ne ngune ge lama chan chu sum ba za chen bo 주변과 문제 난그 요래데 다 뜻수 나나 양지 기왕하마 장열리가 롭종 난그 인다 파야다 까카 강아 순주 라양 점점 lâm 고야 제 마도케제 하정 용용차도 요래
까까까라고 말해.
탄탄낙제 인다 파야다 까카 강아스는 부예라고라 달라마 트부 그 기왕하마 문에 그제 당케 준상 선 참은 존에 제 텔레선다 다 디니야 디나 간다 트부거와 트부거 다때 대연자제 저쪽으로 동우부 돈의 상은 따와이나 참은 친토고 요래 하고토 토코 요래라 토고 요래와 트부거세 이는 다지 마지 양시 지와 지린데 되니 카카세나 칼레 드레긴들 양자 람도 고건도 왔어 단단다 람 먹고 서레니레 요레다 레레니레 근데 다바 펜순 데다바 게 돈이 따라 초가 두바랑 그 저통기 그 드르자레니레 요레스 다 텔은 다 지더니 초가 제바 구지 요마레 숨고 요레다.
And we come to Vajra statement 34. Chiefly for those who are already tamed, a summarized ritual is also accepted. So then one might think that this is quite in contradiction to the previous statement where we said that that always the extensive ritual is necessary, and so here we are saying a summarized ritual is accepted. And so what this refers to is that it depends on the person. So it says chiefly for those who are already tamed. So the previous statement was more talking in a general sense, while this statement is speaking about certain individuals. And a certain individual, if for them, they would attain like liberation through the summarized, the short path or ritual, then it would be permissible. But there's only really just a few of those. For example, in a Tibetan Buddhist tradition, we have very special rituals for recognizing someone as a turku, like the rebirth of a very precious lama. And so then this person is recognized as a very special being, a bodhisattva, and so on. And so then, because he's a turku and has already trained in previous lives and practiced in previous lives, he is expected perhaps to possess all the qualities of being a scholar and like composition and debate and so on. And so one may think that he should know everything. But then still there are many rebirths of lamas who still have to learn the Tibetan alphabet over again. And there are just a few, even among those who do not even have to do that. So there are really just a few of those kind of individuals. And this statement is speaking to those whose mind is already tamed, those to be tamed are already tamed. For them, an extensive ritual is necessary.
Choga dupa katoni, tani durzan dursatela, dunkin kanza de la kandaja gore de sungayore. Dela Ramna ta lama de la sanje tawiji gore se de sungayore. Ta lama de la sanje tawimina and then unshi yoba de la go yore se, unshi toba. Ying sim yonsu zoba. Ndatin dan dari mdosene che hakoko me bayina ngushi kanlang kanzam ngushi to baje go yore so then ta te ta we mari na ya tha na ya che yin ke rei hiba so ti rei hiba siba de desang darate sanje ke tamjin chimbi hime na yang ra then ngushi ma tham na yang ra yin ke rei kanlang kanza hako to go yore so ngre che perna pemre ta deni lejre dang teso kare insare koram kam da mubala sama dang ta de ta beje lama de la chakjin sumbo karong je go chango yoris ta de ke ndrwar se loma de la yang je den de ta beje je wa ngama ni tanda ke jangwa gomba tanda production sumba de ta beje nin zomba yina teni da di de tawetela teni choga duba zamka ringdo yore yeso.
And so then such a person who is already tamed and who only requires a brief ritual, what this verse is speaking here is also about what kind of tamer, like basically what kind of teacher they require. Ideally, that guru would be just like the Buddha, or if not, then in a medium case, that guru would possess like clairvoyant powers, even if it doesn't necessarily mean that they know everything, every single thought that the disciple is thinking or other people are thinking. Not in that sense, but just a general kind of clairvoyant mind. And then at least the third level is the guru would know what family the disciples or other people belong to. So even though they might not have the omniscient wisdom of a Buddha or clairvoyant powers, the Lama might know what family the disciple belongs to, for example, to the Lotus family or the Karma family, or he would know the aspirations and the mental dispositions of the disciples. So it must be a Lama of either one of those three kinds. And then that one to be tamed, that disciple we are speaking about here, also has to be someone who has already extensively practiced in previous lives. So if they come together, then summarized ritual is accepted.
yeah, that you the Dorji song, Sunju song about it. Sumgön kollo mebjong janchuk sem song. Ngaso namju sungkor gom senda nyamli mambo naya yore sungkor gom. Dati na sungkor ye sungkor shibada karere. Song shibada suso rani perna je jinkor tawa jingnan song ne dorji rawa tawa jingnan ma song ne chilo ne je jin par che tam je nang tsur yong mu taba ndela song shirawa de kapsa. Dela ta yakyu de janchok semdri song jidin songo de songo yore.
Then Vajra statement 35 says, the marvelous wheel of protection is the armor of bodhichitta. So this wheel of protection is what we normally visualize in our various practices. So there's this circle or like protection sphere surrounding the mandala, and oneself is inside that the mandala, and the protection sphere is like a fence that is made of vajras and so on. And this sphere prevents any hindrances and obstacles to enter the mandala from the outside. But Jikten Sumgön said that the best protection sphere is bodhichitta.
Dan de kapsa jetan da de yin sen nga zo de zon da da sungkor shiban de mer da dorje ke mer gom de dorje ke mer nang de da ishi ge chogo jo yorwa de tamje gom ne da tenda ma je ba ina de ne dragwe tamje ke ngarang chola la ni gri si dragwe tamje ke ngarang cho char char ju gri si da de da we je 초 되네 라초로 공양라고 당 되네 도르지 메르곰 되네 나라서 바움베자 락차 라서 바케톤다 드라베네 장지도 되네 하정 그 땡사보리스네 된다순크 요르 손레 다 디스레드 땡사보리 지르당 땡사보 임바당 나란수 냠린 고요리 데예나양 조 체휴데 다 문내가 송아 야휴데 장초그스름데 차도 요리 송레.
And so other people, and so again it could also be really us, claim that concerning the wheel of protection, the wrathful deities and Vajra boundaries and so forth are profound. So they say that it's necessary to establish this Vajra sphere, this protection sphere made of fire mountains and masses of fire and Vajras, and the 10 wrathful wands, wisdom wrathful wands, and so on. So they say that if one might say that if one doesn't visualize all of that, then those enemies and obstructors, those hindrances will come and cause a lot of harm, will enter the sphere. And so therefore they say that what's really profound therefore is the visualization of the wrathful deities in the protective sphere, and the fence of Vajras and fire masses, and then also the mantras that go along with it, such as Venza Raksha Raksha and so on. So they say that this is all very profound. And of course, it is profound and it is necessary to do that when we do our practice. However, the actual and really most important protection one could have, the greatest protection, is bodhichitta.
And soso simju la chancho ke semina tene ngaran so ke dorji mer gonde wala tine tene mela la kiyo mares mela call me rawang tadero ngaran so zenata ko mela me rawang tadero mela rawang tadero ngaran so tang koran so chepar mela sinata chepar de janjok sen yom
meri gom na yang.
Dorji mere gom de na, pene mehla tok chu na, then dorji mere ka thuk marwas. Teni chu long teni long la tok chu na, de ge yang ka thuk yo marwa. Marang su ta njong ye rem ji gom yo wa. Tara de sungkor gom de. Ta yina la kizi indra wo de kare risi na janchok semdri isi. Ngune la kizi. Janchok semge ta ndortog yo res. Janchok semge ndortoba de pe na maje ga ndajin pang na. Nda de jaksak bin ra wo yo mar wa tini ta bin ra wo me se de ngarang chezo golo. Namga tongba na nda pang wan ta jikpa re. Dēla tūne, tēne ngārāng tsū ndī tsō chīkyū tē sūngkhor gōm dē yāng jāngchok sāng tsī sīmbā tōne gōm gō jī tē gār chīmbō rē isi.
So, therefore, if one visualizes a protective sphere without having bodhicitta in one's mind, for example, even if one visualizes this sphere of fire masses and so on, if one doesn't have bodhicitta, then, for example, these fire masses will not be able to oppose the fire gods, because they are the fire themselves, or the wind gods cannot defeat it by our wind and so on. So the four elements that we usually visualize in the protective sphere, there's always something that we will not be able to prevent if we do not have bodhicitta, even if we visualize it. But the only thing that cannot be defeated in any way is bodhicitta, which overcomes all. It tames them all. So if one doesn't have bodhicitta and generates this protection sphere, it's just like you're shooting an arrow, but normally when you shoot an arrow, you want to have a target. And if you don't have a target, it's really pointless to shoot an arrow because you're just shooting it into empty space. So it's just like that if you have no bodhicitta. So therefore, even though we do visualize the protection sphere, it's very important that we do so on the basis of bodhicitta.
Janchok semde kunzob jwang de senane tene perna nga so namju ninji yene yale gu songba na gi yale si song 야휴 데이터 잠바다 닌지데 차도 요리 세군조 고만드세도 다네 장초섬다 닌지 검데데 무만에 데 라고레 고 nde tamjen ngarang chu nde no ba chi andra no nam to khan de 닌지 검거래서 닌지 검데 nde no ba de chi thoko yo marese 그런 no chi tina chi thoko yo marese 다 데이터 그 장초든 전다 닌지게 고차 고는 다된 총송 송커야 휴테 차도 디 강라 드니 따라 도르지 메르라 소바 탐제 곰제데 양 ndrke yore de timderke ndare den dondan den bawand sena jigbo hongra ngi do jeng se dan jigbo hongra hom gom de bayina ndel las jurbo songkor je yomare song dondan den bawand sena hom jigbo gom de nan de ke la me chi ba je yomare jumsin kan sen dondan den bawand sena jujum mala re ba ke gib sanji darade gegle sanji ni jangmi song dra geg la ya da pha ya de sanje shiba ji lo lo yo mar so don dan den bong la ta de da ta wa de don de de ni so so le nu jin dong kin je me ba ro de de song kho ya hu de don dan den ba wan se na hong kong kun zo ji wan se na jang ba de nin je gong na de ni ta song kho ya bo ngun ne ke song kho che de din ba jin na chu de yo res.
So from the relative perspective, the best protection sphere, the best weapon really to protect one, the armor, is bodhicitta and compassion. And so if you have bodhicitta and compassion, then even if you feel you're like harmed by like evil spirits and so on, harm doers, if you cultivate this thought of compassion, then actually no one can harm you. Even if they actually wanted to, they can't. So therefore, bodhicitta and compassion are the best protection sphere. And then on top of that, it is also fine to still visualize the protection sphere made of Vajras and fire masses and so on. Because that is also good due to interdependence. And then from the ultimate perspective, is that the greatest protection sphere is to meditate on the syllable Hong. If one just meditates on the syllable Hong, the Hong can overcome everything. Milarepa also had said that not only are obstructors and harm doers non-existent, on the ultimate level, even a Buddha does not inherently exist. So if one realizes this ultimate view, then really there is no one who can cause any harm. So on the relative level, the best protection sphere is love and compassion, bodhicitta, and on the ultimate level, it is the syllable Hong, to meditate on the Hong. So these really are the true or really most authentic, the best protective spheres.
Ate ngaransa namjen de lara ngen den thongso make den thongso. They den bare true ngolan de yorela trushi ke mai de gen den thong yong yore. Di wo de namdo de gen ro ke nu ji song se wa de yong ge yore de ge nu de ji tho yore is. Ta namjo ngaranso make dola make the mo dorje son sanje jong de ne. Make the mo dorje shimanda then namjun de la gom tabaina make the mo dorje de la set nang ni me yor se tar na jancho sum ba sai nim bran yin cha de yor se then de ke de la gom hin ri ne ya de rin de nang tar de number nan ze gran yin cha de yor so maro right de number nan ze gran cha de yor dara right jawa ren nang 다 데니 ngaranso ke meite ke nang yong che tamje dara number nanze ke ngol nang to ko yoris ta dengne ra je sanje gompang top che ding hawe che yornd da tamje che number nanze ke ngol nang go da rim do dara ngaranso ke nyamni che ta ma to rims o meite mo dorjes to mo dorjes ka re ha ma ona ta kable yor ma to ta meite mo dorjen da 다 사인님 보란 예리야 세 다랑 아랑솔은 짐바 요버갑서 되네 다다 왜는 냠는 나온들 되네 다 메이키 되게 통용전다 담제 되네 넘버 난제 그거니 나용으로서 낭다도 제바이나 되네 더 멜롱이 시그란 인차도 요래서 다 대답인데 되네 메 인다 담제야 또 왜나 왕보 아랑서 메 나와 나지 인 담제야 된다 왜나 레가라 된다 왜나 냠는 더 드르네 tanda window du tane da gigs and nu jing kin jin tong yo maris chebar do tang ngaran zo ge dala damar se be dra nu bar se be ge zor se be sen song go yore tang ngaran zo ge zho zon do de so chama zho bo zo ne zho bo zo di ta na koran zo ge chek zo bo ji la yin na yang ngaran zo ge chek nim bo le chor yon ro yore 말에 코란스 그 책주보 셀 나용나 맞추 때 책 힘보를 저 journalist 장산 상하 줄을람 바라와 책 힘보를 journal도 코란스 책주보 뒤주보 차마서
나랑 그거는 님보다 만난
게 님보 나랑 저 님보 저여라차 나랑 저잖아 장셔서 받다니 냐민 가서 님보를 저여도 나그 제 바가데 그 책주보 휴지 독자 휴지 랍여 드나야 수가들 게 탑여 말와 남카는 그 저지 하대 봐나 이래래 가세 욕되나요 포는 사체요 말 포는 사미자 되니다 너무 잘카대 되니 뭐 좋답도 여러와 됐다
For example, sometimes people say, like, I guess, saw a demon, a spirit, and no, from the perspective of like a delusion, with deluded eyes, from the perspective of seeing with delusion, it seems to be like a real evil spirit that we see. And so then when that spirit thinks he wants to harm you, and you think, oh, he's harming me, then there's this experience of he's actually harming one. But then the Buddha spoke about the ignorance Vajra, that is related to one's eyes. The eyes are the ignorant Vajra, and that has an outer and inner aspect. And the outer aspect is the eye sense power itself, which is the bodhisattva, Kshitigarbha, or the earth essence bodhisattva. And the inner aspect is the sense object that it connects to. And of the 5 Buddha families, that is Vairochana. And so then, as a result of recognizing that, all appearances appear having the nature of Vairochana. And this is not something that has to happen only after one has attained enlightenment, but we can actually practice that at any time. So the eye is the ignorant Vajra, and if one doesn't understand that, then it's more difficult. But if one does understand, then it is the bodhisattva Kshitigarbha, or earth essence. So even when there is still grasping in the mind. So then one sees everything that one sees with one's eyes, all sights become the essence of Vairochana. And then if all appearances appear that way, one accomplishes the mirror-like wisdom. And so then the same can be applied to the other 5 sense powers, which are then each related to one of the 5 Buddha families. And so then if one sees things that way, then one doesn't see any like obstructor, harm doer, evil spirit, and so on any longer. So it's mainly the way one sees them then, and one can make them all become one's friends. All these so-called enemies and obstructors are one's friends. For example, in our prayer, the opening prayer, we say, all mother sentient beings and so forth, especially those enemies who hate me. So it's especially those, if you make them your friends, then your perspective changes. So for example, even if they would say speak harshly to you, then maybe even that's what they have in mind. They want to speak harshly to you. But if you don't see it that way, you can transform the harsh speech into pleasant speech. So then to someone who practices bodhicitta in this way, then actually the way harsh words appear is actually as kind and pleasant. And then if one sees it this way, no one can harm such a bodhisattva. It would be just like one is like boxing with one's fists in space. No matter how much you try to hit, you're not gonna hit anything. So then one has gained real victory.
다 dorjisong dare sumchi sojobat dala zalong dan bandurwa lakpar sabsong ta zalong ke nyamlen de ndorwa kaps hajang ke sapo yore songre de song gowan de yang yin ke o ta sangha dang ndo ni ke chebar de za de tigle ko ni chebar yo ko yore dane sanghan de tamang la dane kawa chungwan de sotamje za de tigle ke wangri se darawen de ke nang ke yore so ina ya ta jidin sungo ke ndro kaps ta za dang dara de zalong ke damba de hajan ten sambo yore so re.
Then we come to Vajra statement 36. It says the vital points of channels and winds are more profound in the Vinaya. And so that is because others make a division between the sutras and the tantras, and they say that really the main difference between the sutras and tantras is the practices of the channels and the winds. And they say that the reason why we say that the secret mantra is rich in skillful means that require the least difficulties is because secret mantra has those practices of channels and winds. And so then Jikten Sumgön says that actually in the Vinaya teachings, so these practices of channels and winds are even more profound, extremely profound in the sutra teachings, the Vinaya teachings.
다 담본데 조데 가르차데 인도 값서 다 자롱장 희반데 안데레 류장나 자장나 롱장 롱장나 셈장 세데 데네 류조버 뎀네 라테 진두 라인 게 데네 띵인진 제와라서바 용토고 요레성 다 ngaranzo tsalong nyamling gomyan zo de ta tingin sangha ki ta jinrem da thamji yarjen roya ki do zo yin za tinin durba kapso ta de lune tinin zopor de jinde hachang ke karchim bor yusung yore.
And so this is because in the Vinaya teachings, how the channels and the winds are practiced is so it is said that if one's body is straight, one's channels are straight, and if one's channels are straight, one's winds are straight, and if the winds move straightly, then in straight way, then the mind is kind of straight, which means that if the body is in a straight position, then it is said that samadhi will naturally arise. And so therefore, actually, in order to cultivate samadhi, also in this tradition, the channels and the winds are considered as most important. And so also in the secret mantra, the development, the improvement of the generation stage and so on also depends on that. And in the Vinaya teachings, also the physical posture that is straight and which is related to the channels and winds is considered as very important.
다 남주 ngaranzo tsalong nyamni jiyanzo zo de gareresina tenen derwa za dagba luk jung serto ko yores long dagba la tenen nga jung serto ko yori tigle dagba la tenen yi jung serto ko yore sonre 단 대인자 중 세바데 누차 히당 데목선 본데 설고 여러바 자롱 그냥린데 조 대리 대인자다 nga촌디 갑소 더버 갑소 저당 소탈 갑소 다네 다라데 추첨라서 바송네 루지고니 다네 메게와테 랑잉게 다라데 루지고네 돈바데 송두 tene lu ka tsa thamje number ta de yore sombare tene nga goni tene ta megewa ye yore tamchar tang chikzob la so ba ke tene nga char tang chikzob la so ba ke tanda pang yondu nga long de ran yin ke number ta de yore se marang zo tene da ye ji goni ta ji gandar 다랑 아랑주 남준지 삼바자지와 장초그 샘라 소바 냠닌다 데니 야 렘지 따라데 누주 탐제 다바 단한거랑이 다보랑이 다바 람잠도 곤드라비두 데니 틀레다랑 잉가 넘버 다데 요리시 다텐다 자택론섬데 넘버 다팔라티네 된 타르코스 응온도 저반데 딜람니 용거 요바이데 인자 데니 드르버 갑수다 냠니 자롱 그 냠니 시반데 다 루촉상지도 조 차도 요리송래
So in the when we practice the channels and winds and drops, what happens is that body, speech, and mind become purified. So through the channels, through the practice of the channels, mainly the faults of the body become purified. And through the practice of the winds, mainly the faults of the speech become purified. And through the practice of the drops, mainly the faults of the mind become purified. And fault here refers to basically attachment, aversion, and ignorance, which become all purified through the practice of the channels, winds, and drops. And so according to the Vinaya or the Pratimoksha, where we practice the discipline of vows, the ethical discipline, so we are taking a vow of refraining from like the 3 non-virtuous actions of the body, and so that purifies the channels in one's body. And then abandoning the 4 non-virtuous actions of the speech, such as idle talk and harsh speech and so forth, that naturally purifies the winds in one's body. And then in one's mind, through practicing bodhichitta, a vast mind of bodhichitta, the entire universe and all beings become purified. One sees them in a pure way. And so everything becomes this infinite field of purity. And this naturally purifies the drops. So then through purifying the channels, winds, and drops, one ultimately actualizes the 3 kayas. And so for this reason, it's also related to the Vinaya. In the Vinaya practice, when one practices the channels, winds, and drops, the emphasis is on having a straight physical posture.
Da de da za te long sam na par da so na de ne da sang je ya lu mi ba re so re da sang je ya ma dong ri sa yin mi ba re sin de bu de da je dang arang zo za long jang de yang ne ga hin na gar chen bo cha de yo re de yi xi ge long je wa la so ba yi xi ge ngong do je wa la so ba to ne da ha jang gar chen bo ri de dan de za long ge nyam ni de ji guba zang hiba ma do ji lok de ha ma wo de de dan du cha la su ba dan ji je ya ge jin nan jor de su mo do wa den du cha la su ba je so na de ne dan du cha la su ba yong de hyun ro ne de ne gan da ngarang su gu don de san je ji gong pang de top to ge me zang da daran de wa ndi kap su so ta ji kap su de ne long ji le de ne sang je ba ge dang wa so ne de na so yong ge yo re long gang ji le de long ji hi ban de all long yan thi ma go ba ting long ma ni ma go ba ram up so ya ne ta to so hyam na te se yong go yo re te tan ra me de chertang ge zalong de la ga ba ja kyo ma re te yang zalong de nyam ni jitang hi ba don ji se ji go da le ji bo hi ne de je de ba zam gen de yo ma re song re ta zo jitang de ha go go re song.
And so then, when one purifies one's channels, winds, and drops, then there is no other place to go than to the state of enlightenment. So it is important to understand the crucial point of this, the crucial point of the wisdom winds that will then directly manifest. So what it means is that it's not enough that one just knows that the channels, winds, and drops is something that one should practice, but one also has to know how to properly practice this. Because if one doesn't know how to properly practice this, then one might become controlled by afflictive emotions such as desire. And being controlled by desire, we will not attain enlightenment, that which we want to attain. Also in the Vinaya and the Pratimoksha, it is said only through a single wind one can attain enlightenment. And so what this is speaking about here is that without having to pull up the lower winds and press down the upper winds, one just can allow one's winds to settle naturally. So this is how it is explained according to the sutras, which maybe is given a different name, but it really speaks about how one should engage in practice. So it's not just knowing that one should do a certain practice, but it's important to know the way to engage in practice.
다디오 도지송 순치섭도연바 심투 꾸이게 뒤긴 때양 통시반다래 다 심투시 바데 신라 근턱 누발라디네 꾸이게데 뒤긴 때양 통시 다 다른 데값서 꾸이게 기반데 대긴 기분 힘보 꾸이게 나버 히바스 단달랑 무슨 거요래 되니 단데 양 하장게 또가와 단다게 하장게 단다지 차도 요르스 단다지 차연도 되니 단데 양 장초 다라데 라마 게베히니게 되니 진랍당 되니 다 소소게제 대바 다나라서 바든라 그냠니 좀 토니 되니 양구이기데 통화게 되어 봐 예송.
So then there's Vajra statement 37. It says, by being endowed with blessings, the basic consciousness can also be seen at other times. So this basic consciousness here, or the alaya consciousness, here it refers to one's Buddha nature, one's true nature, that is generally said to be very difficult to realize. But so here Jikten Sumgön is saying that if there is a guru who possesses blessings and a disciple who possesses faith and a pure view, then this basic consciousness can be seen.
되니 jirtang kunye sen de ngarang su chen konde ge iya ta be cha de yorwa kun se de man chai ro yes dan ko da nyang de ni ge iya ta be cha yores dan ko da nyang de ni ge yes sen du kantar ko ngo da de to so ai na ti cha ni ta dara nyang de yamon ngarang su sen nam do ge yiwang de mo yo be cha ni 되니 냥대당 남도 그 유언로 베차니 코라세 용거 여러와 다대인자 되니 다 다랑아랑 저제 차자진 몰아서 보곰네 남도 그다 남도가 세고라 다 남도 담인가 안디 되니 꾸이게데 통도 받으나 용거 여러에 소말에 다대인도 이나야 꾸이긴 통 희반데 라 페르나스 담보테존. No.
So this basic consciousness, or it's also called it's called the all ground, meaning that it is the ground, the basis of samsara and nirvana. So all means like everything, and so of what it is samsara and nirvana. So when one realizes the essence of this consciousness, then one attains nirvana, or when one is unmoved by thoughts, one is not controlled by thoughts, that is nirvana, and when one is moved by thoughts, it is samsara. Or when one practices mahamudra and thinking stops, then it is said that then one sees this basic consciousness.
단데라 냠닝 게체 야보메나 체 야보메스 야보난게 하장게 단라 첸토모메나 남준 대성고요레 사주바바 장초선바 탐제게야 데니 꾸이긴데 또당라 데 문콘는 다 람보체지라 락베인주네 온다 람보치 임바리 삼사 대자마도 통두고요 말스 무스 되네 tela ta mut no tro ya ne mut po te ke teni ta pena mut gen simo mongkong ne anda ne ta langbo che la ba gen jo yondu ka he ke langbo che jo to ko yore ka he ke jang da wo tang teni cha ma da wo tang ka wa da wo tang tela so ba dram da jo yong ro wa te ta do ma to ke tang ne ku yi na bra he ban da ri san ko ngaran so me jim ba ke ngu bo jin thong yo ba ta ba thong ke de ha chang ke ka la kha bo cha de yo res.
So then others say it is generally maintained that unless one is on a really high level of practice, like a 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva, one cannot see this basic consciousness directly. And so the example that is given is like 6 blind people or 6 people at night who are to touch an elephant and then describe what they think that they have touched. So then each of these 6 people will touch a different part of the elephant, and so therefore they will think that it's something else. So some might think that, oh, this is a wall and this is a pillar and so on. So everyone will describe the object in a different way, depending on what part they are touching. And so it is generally maintained that this is how it is with the basic consciousness, that it's extremely difficult to just directly really see it, like seeing something with one's eyes.
Tate zang ta kunje hibanda jerdang aran so de ka tama ke gongba ben song ke yores tani ngaran so nam hi cho je yi yondu tani kunjin yi ji nam hi song yong ke yore nam hi cho jog de la wambo ngai hiba de yi hi de la nam hi cho jos ti ti kala nyumon bo ke yi de nondu nyumon bo yi de dumbas tani ramji yan ro ndu tani kunji number hiba je ba sin nam hi cho je sin ndare ta ngarang kunde kapso ta kunji hibande gandarang konde tamje ge yeta ba ta de yin hi bu nimbo ta ba de cha de yor ji dang tani ndata gandar sa chu ba ba chang chu samba ina ha chang ge tong ka ba tan da ji ri de ina yang Jikten Sumgön kong te song do teni kong tena we ta kanra la suba tena nyamli nang tena we du teni ta kong ke kunji te ngu su zay yo ba chi song yo re kunji ngu su tong yo ba song yo re si Jikten Sumgön nyamli to ne mare kong ke Jikten Sumgön kong ke tong kunji tong wa song yo ra so sa chuba was Jikten Sumgön Jikten Sumgön
당신은 공기 통요래서 나더니
그런 게 나지 송요
통견서래 소이나 통통그래
소이나 통통 말한다 장초스 바 사 chuba ba ga 통통 야보 저기는 통통고 요 말이 송어 봐
셴바스
아
셴바기 남슬라고 말해
힘바기 있어
셴바기 제세들
말해
사 chuba기 마다 통통고 말해
말 사 chuba ba ga 문코는 그 랑보 지다 마도 통통고 요 말해
셴바기라 지금 송은
저전대 네 Jikten Sumgön 상황 때 송거 저라데 문코는 나 나빠냠나 랑보친 동안은 나 이마도 그 꾸이 처리인데 통통고 요 말했어 말해 뭐 이마 송더니 또 전에 대해서 Jikten Sumgön 콩게 통 사면 통통고 송요 말이다 신랍 딤발라 마당 소소 냠린 더탄나 통통킨 요레스 된 콩다베나 강저 냠린 나더라 되니 통송소 되니 콩 Sa Kyobpa ba riwe sina kong ke milin song, tanda song kong kimpa no chong zai ro.
Sa chuba mempa yang thong tu kari ra. Tine zomna?
Ta tau song da ri da.
Lama sena da nyamlan da zomna? So this alaya consciousness, or this all ground consciousness, was explained in the final word of the Buddha, the final turning of the wheel. And so it was explained that there are 8 kinds of consciousness. And within that, there is also the alaya consciousness. So first there are the 6 sense consciousnesses, including the mental consciousness, so the 5 sense powers, and then the mental consciousness. And then the 7th is the afflicted mind consciousness. And then the 8th is the all-grounded, the alaya consciousness. And so here, now this is general, and so here in this context, the alaya, or all-ground consciousness, is the ground, the basis of all of samsara and nirvana, or it is Buddha nature here. And so now others maintain that only once one has become a 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva can one see it, otherwise it's difficult. But Jikten Sumgön responds that it is not necessary, because if one there's a guru with blessings and one practices properly, then it is possible also for someone else to see the alaya consciousness. And so he said that when I myself was meditating in the snow mountain, I saw it. So he himself now, in this case, claiming that he is not a 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva.
That the Kantara Kunjindala, the young Jancho Samba Sachuba, Mongkong Lambo, Mongkong Tonga Lambo Che, Zamle, Ta Tomatape, that data dates on the Mihibu Kunjidang, the young Sadumba Wake, Jetawa Yinda, Taranto Kunjidang, the Satambo Be, Ta Ngusum to Tonga Kunjidang, the Ta Pena Sosuji would do such a tate. Kunji Yinba the Mayinba, there are Tamachuba, Tajido, young data with Jadang, there are Sosujo Hiba, the Jolam Lasuban, the Sola, you know, Yoro. Data book Tonaji, Yundin the Yundin Chimden Chungsum, and Amambo Yore, Sungo Yore. That
Tamabadi, Kong Kareko. Tongu yore ina kotak chugu yo mari.
Yin da mai.
Ko ketam des do ina tong tong do. Ina yore sra.
Teni ta te ta yewa mambo ji sen nang yore. Dan de zo tam je ke zo ta so so ke nyamling gren ba toni song yong yore. Teni dan ra wen di so so ke ti ke nenga je ha kona. Teni so so nyamling ke che ji ka che la yo bande yang le la bo wen ha ko to yore song do.
So therefore it is said that when others say that only a 10th Bhumi Bodhisattva can really see this basic or alaya consciousness, and otherwise it's like people in the dark touching an elephant and just seeing it partially. So Jikten Sumgön then says that, for example, on the 7th Bhumi there are some who see it as it is, or on the 1st Bhumi, there are some who directly see it, or even ordinary beings. So ordinary beings now are those who are on the path of application and so on. So even they may see this basic consciousness, but on that level, they are not so sure about it. So they might have some doubts about whether it is it or not. So there's many different levels of the qualities arising in one's mind, higher, middling, and lower. So this here is speaking about the different levels of practice. But if you understand this crucial point here, then based on your own personal practice, it is that one can easily then know and see where one is at.
Tandi tunde ngumbo shamba ke tinan long dinan song. Trende ta ke jinam dang rajum lopa lodinam. Rimjin yedang jikdan ni dang ni je mada ni se ta dik long de so think yor. Ta cherdang kui ge sibanda darang arang zo hop de kara che ra tu gona le la po yo ma rai de tan de so tola. Kui ge hibande tola Jangwa nangwa na hirab je paradu simbe tinju ngondo jin dina na tene shibta yores
Tinigala. Shara paradu sembhatani ngundogin.
ngondo jin de hirab je paradu simbe gomba tarzira.
Oh, does it? So then there's a quote by Maitreya Natha. Through these defilements, the fools, arhats, trainees, and intelligent trainees are gradually obscured by 4, 1, 2, and 2 defilements. So to explain this basic consciousness just like that is not so easy to understand it, but it is explained especially in a text called The Ornament of Manifest Realization, which is a commentary on the perfection of wisdom, or the Prajna Paramita.
Sunande Danje Zebanye Toanye Bedanan Banse de Jige Nanjo Balon Robai Siben Zolen Roa Jo Yamba Bawe Jedan Jimba Dang Kundu Zambo de Ande Yen Pida Gunje Jizo Dalo Gewan Dada Danje Rado Janjo Sunjo Rumbo Je Maji Banan Jije Jiba Nyamba Me Bayang Gona Gonzan Pewar Jo. May every being ailing with the disease be freed at once from every malady. May all the sickness that afflicts the living be instantly and permanently healed. Thank you very much.